go straight into it, man. So at the moment, I mean, you and I obviously go back a little way to the London days, but you've
We
been
do indeed.
extremely busy of late, and you've been doing a lot for the Mind charity.
Yeah, so I am almost 8 months into recovery. So I made a pledge to myself to stop drinking, never touch a drug again about 8 months ago. And ever since then, I guess things have sort of started falling into place for me in terms of what I want to do and how I want to give back to the community. And in my personal life, obviously, everything has dramatically improved. But in terms of the work I'm doing with Mind, that I guess that journey all started probably 2 months into my recovery. And it was just, I wanted to do a challenge. I was going to do this 50K walk, like a big event. I think it was called, do you know what? I can't even remember what the challenge was called specifically, but I managed to get a hamstring tear when I was playing rugby. So I postponed that for when I was fit again and fit enough to do something. So that took me to November last year, where I decided to do my own challenge because there were no events going on at this time of year, because events often stop in the UK over the winter months just because the weather's poor. But I wanted to do something before the year was up because I'd been on this dramatic change in my journey. So I did a 50K challenge just up here in the Lake District. And the 50K, so I mapped out a route where I just ran it, no breaks, no stops. So obviously I did a lot of running training in preparation for that one. And I think we raised £1,500, which, it was a challenge I did solo. So I was pretty chuffed with
challenge,
that.
Is incredible, and anything you can obviously give back, it goes without saying.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that just, then I decided I wanted to be really brave and go into the details of why I was doing it, because I thought, okay, this is all well and good, raising money for this amazing charity, but I was like, I need to back this up with creating awareness and actually going into detail of my story. Because, I'm a 27-year-old guy. I think, what I went through can be very relatable to people that are struggling with similar issues. So I decided to go public on the fact that I was sober, recovered from booze and drugs, from addiction. And since that point, I guess, mate, I've been becoming more and more open about my journey. So as you can see, for those of you who are new to me, you'll be able to see on my account, I go into much greater detail as to what I went through and what recovery looks like as a 27-year-old man in the UK. But wherever you are in the world, there are, I think, hopefully some decent tips and some advice that I can share that can help.
So, mate, I'm curious to know, when you said, you're obviously only 27, so you're very young in retrospect, but to get to a point where you've decided complete sobriety, is the way forward, and that's obviously fantastic, right? At what point were you at before making that decision? Because it's a huge decision to make at any age, but particularly being 27, we're very young, we're very active, we're very social.
Yeah. So as you know as well, Ben, I'm a musician, so I'm glad I made this decision when I was 26, because as you know, there's a notorious 27 club for rock stars that die. So but sadly, I know, it's a shocking joke, but it's, it's a thing. But, thankfully, I don't think it matters what age you are. If you get to a breaking point, or what I'd call my rock bottom, that can happen at any age to anyone. So I think there's got to be no judgment on that, because someone could have that moment when they're 21. Someone could have that moment when they're in their 50s. I think the sooner you can have that, it was like a spiritual awakening for me. Like, obviously we all want that as soon as we can if we need it. But, you know, for as long as I can remember, I was going through, you know, I was going darker and darker in the, you know, in the mistakes, and, you know, my problems just were getting worse and worse as time went on. From the age of, I guess, 21 to 26, you know, it was like a living nightmare for the majority of it. Because even when I was sober, you know, I hadn't dealt with the underlying issues that were going on in my head. And, you know, things do manifest in certain ways when they go unresolved. So I had a lot of deeply rooted issues that go back to my childhood, my teenage years, that I suppressed, you know, and I didn't deal with, and I was masking them in drugs, in booze, you know, in people pleasing, in my relationships with girls. I was just finding ways to avoid feeling how I, you know, how I was feeling.
Industry, sorry, mate,
but
do you
then
think
I
your
guess
industry exasperated it a lot in terms of, you know, working as a musician and touring and all the rest of it?
absolutely. Well, you get, number one, exhaustion. Like I would suffer from exhaustion all the time because I would be doing 4 gigs a week, and then I'd be in sessions, songwriting sessions, teaching. Like I do it all. And I guess that's such a key thing. Like if you don't look after the basic stuff, like getting, you know, a good routine in your sleep, that's going to make sort of your anxieties worse for starters. But on top of that, I was obviously in this drug and booze spiral cycle that I just couldn't get out of. So put that all together and I was in a very, very bad place.
How does it start? Like, I mean, how do you,
but I guess,
who opens your eyes to it? I mean, is it just like any other sort of social drug? You sort of dabble, or you're trying it here and there out with your friends or at a festival, or is a bit more to that, given, you know, that you're a touring musician and all the rest of it?
it's definitely, you know, it's everywhere in terms of like, I'm playing at nightclubs, bars, you know, music venues, and of course it's everywhere. People are offering it to you. But to be honest, by this point I was very much involved and invested in drug culture myself, because I also played rugby a lot, and I think the rugby, you know, I love my rugby mates, and I love the culture, but I do think it can go a bit too far sometimes. You do have this sort of like toxic masculinity that comes with rugby. Sort of like you give into peer pressure without realizing. So there was the music, but there was also the rugby. And I got sucked into all of it, and quickly realized that, you know, it wasn't just, I wasn't doing it for the fun of it. I was actually, it was almost like medicinal. You know, it was actually doing something much deeper to me, even though I would still be doing it in these big groups. But yeah, I guess I got into it initially through rugby,
Yeah, right.
I suppose.
Before getting into the
that's the
music
thing.
scene.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's when I was first introduced. So cocaine was my drug of choice, and I think that was where I first found it, was within the rugby circle. But then quickly realized this isn't just rugby. This is, and you know what? It's not just music. It's everywhere. I know it's awful. It's awful in the construction
Mate, I don't think
industry.
there's an industry that doesn't have
Any
it, to be fair,
industry,
let's be honest.
exactly. And you know, and that's why I'm doing this, I guess, because people can quite quickly lose their way with the drug, because at the end of the day it's a drug, and it has a very strong, you know, it's very addictive, and quickly it can have a hold of you, and you won't even realize it's happening.
I mean,
That's what happened to me.
I've seen you gig plenty of times around London, man, and you're obviously sensational, and you always come across as someone who's so confident. And if I took someone, you know,
Yeah.
with me to watch you, that would be the first thing I'd say. My God, he's just such a confident kid.
Yeah.
Was that generally you, or were you on something a lot of times?
So honestly, no. What, like, that was one good thing about it. Like, I always did approach my work very professionally. There were occasions, I won't lie to you, where I was under the influence when doing a gig. But do you know what? More often than not, I always tried to be as professional as I could, because music in a way did save me, because it was always that thing that I had, songwriting. It was always there for me when I needed something. It was always therapy. But in terms of the confidence, I think it's interesting you asked that, because I think naturally I am a confident, outspoken guy, but I think I would use my confidence to actually mask how I was feeling deep inside. So, the only way I can sort of like visually represent it is I was screaming inside. Like I felt really unwell deep within. And because I didn't really want to give off the impression that I was struggling. Again, that comes down to just this sort of like masculinity. I wanted to be a man that didn't show off his true emotions. So I would use what I already knew I had, which was this confidence, but I'd use it in the wrong way to mask what was really going on for me deep within. So yeah, and I know I talked to you when I was sort of going through it, but I guess I wish in hindsight that I was a bit more open, with my closest, because, your closest friends, they're going to accept you for whatever, your friends who aren't your friends are the ones that, even when you're in your down times, they expect you to be this confident Brendan, when if you're not feeling that way, you shouldn't have to pretend to be something.
Man, more. And it obviously does separate a lot of things and a lot of people at times. When you show you're maybe not at your best, or going through these high emotions all the time, which no one always does, because we're only human, obviously, at the end of the day. What's been your biggest take then, do you think, in terms of what you learn about yourself since?
Since becoming sober, I've never known myself better. It sort of forced me to take an honest look at my life. And the thing is, all that booze and drugs do when you're in this sort of mindset is take you away from yourself. So for the first time, I forced myself to stick with myself and get, because I did, the months that followed me deciding to be sober were really, really tough, because all I wanted to do was run away from the feeling that was going on inside me. But I knew I couldn't do that anymore. Otherwise, because you were talking, so my rock bottom was when I was traveling in Asia last July. And I did get to a point where I was considering ending things because it was that bad. But I did have this sort of, I would say I'm quite spiritual, and more so since this journey started, because something definitely did internally shift in me. I just dropped to my knees and prayed with my friend, and something just left me. I really felt a change inside me, and I know it sounds a bit far-fetched, but something big happened. Talking higher powers, or whatever you want to call it, and that not forced me, but it made me want to do the work. So since all that happened, like I said, I've been doing tons of therapy. I do have a mentor. We call them sponsors in recovery. And we just, we're accountability buddies, really. So he comes to me when I come to him. Not that I'm ever tempted, but it's more navigating your way through this sober world, because we don't live in a sober world. Everyone drinks, everyone does drugs. It's quite hard to find your way through it, because obviously you do get triggered at times. I was around people doing drugs only a matter of weeks ago, and I knew I had to get out of that situation, because not again, I don't think I am tempted at all, but it's more because it brings back a lot of very dark memories.
What about when you're out
triggering
now, do you still keep quite social, and what happens there with those triggers?
Yeah, so I do. Like, I am lucky with my job. I do gig a lot at the weekends, and since being sober, my work has taken on a new shape, and everything's, I'm more busy than ever in terms of writing and gigging. But of course, like, I think it's important for anyone to stay connected with their social life, because otherwise you can lead to more isolation. So all I've done is filter out the bad people who were in my life before that. They served me then, but they don't serve me anymore.
And
so
like they
I make
obviously
sure
have seen
that
what you're doing for Mind and seen all the charitable work that you're doing. I mean, have they been in contact or not at all?
No, not really, and that says it all, to be honest, Ben, because they only ever wanted me for one thing, and that was to lose your marbles, which and you know what, but I don't feel angry at them. That they're going through something themselves, and I wish them all the best. But right now, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me anymore. So I like I said, I still go out. I drink these 0% beers because I was always, as you know, I like my beer. So fortunately, there are other options. So, and they taste the same. You still get that weird sort of placebo effect buzz because I always found the first few beers was always the best anyway, because you're catching up with your mates. And it's like the ceremony of having a beer. You still have that, you crack one open, and it's great. But all that's changed now is obviously I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. So if I start feeling a little bit uneasy or unsafe, I'll just take myself away from the situation, and I'll just go home. But again, I'll probably have still had a really good night with my mates, who I absolutely adore, and they obviously know everything I've gone through, so they're very respectful and respect my boundaries. So if I need to go,
which is huge,
like,
and I think a lot of people there, they really struggle because they don't always necessarily have those support networks in place. And you just touched on that fact that a lot of people have subsided, but you've still got a strong community.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm definitely one of the lucky ones. Like, my family were absolute rocks for me throughout this whole thing. I put them through a hell of a lot, but they stood by my side throughout all the darkness. It was really bad, but they never left my side. And same for my friends. My two best mates, they were with me in Asia when I would say I hit my rock bottom. And they literally just made sure I was getting back on that flight back to England, and they just literally didn't leave my side. So, and that's one thing I would say is, like, if you're going through absolute hell, like, never let your friends go, because they are going to help get you out of it.
Of course. And I think that's a big thing too, a lot of times for anyone. You just don't understand. There is always people there that really care about you so much more than you could think at any given moment. And just if we do lose contact with one another, and we get busy, and everyone's very busy, but it doesn't change anything,
Yeah. It doesn't. No, of course. And I know, people do say, if you're going through a bad time, do reach out, which is great. But I think what people don't realize is, if someone really is going through a bad time, they're not going to want to reach out. So I can understand why it is tricky for friends and stuff, because honestly, when you're in that state of mind, the last thing you want to do is talk about it. So as a friend, all I would say is give the platform, just let them feel safe enough so that they can feel like they want to talk about it, because you can't force anyone to do anything, especially if someone's going through addiction or depression, anxiety. It's really, they need to feel very safe and comfortable with whoever they're going to talk about this stuff with. And of course, like, professionals are there for a reason. So I'd always recommend someone going to a professional. But equally, a big thing that I touch upon on my challenges page is, this isn't just a job it's not a job. I think it's a duty, like, for professionals. It's one for all of us. Like, we're all human. We all need to be kind and look after each other, because that's the only way we're going to move forward, I think, as a greater society, is just learning to be more accepting, because there are still too many people that judge. There's still a stigma around addiction, for example, and hopefully by someone like me, who's 27, seems fairly normal, you know, comes forward and says, you know, what I've been going through. Hopefully that just like shows that, you know, this can actually happen to anyone.
Yeah. Oh, of course, man. And I think,
you know,
the biggest thing as well is the bravery that you're showing in being so open, because you said earlier, that's kind of when it kicked off for you, was being around such a toxic culture.
Yeah.
With, you know, no disrespect to anyone, but that rugby, you know, that kind of, you know, that culture there where they're into the gear, or they're probably not opening up or being vulnerable or showing their emotional sides a lot. So for you to come out and show that is a huge testament.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I really appreciate it. But honestly, like, yeah, of course, it was tough coming forward on all this stuff, but really, it's helped me as well. I think it's a constant reminder of why I'm doing it. So not only I'm hoping it is helping others, but, you know, I also do it for me, you know, because it keeps me in check and it keeps me moving down the right path. And I think that's the thing, you know, people need to realize is like, there's no better feeling than giving back, you know, whatever shape or form that is. Like, if we just take, you're going to become a certain kind of individual, and you're not going to be a very happy individual. So I think the key is you know, where you can is actually just giving back, serving in some shape or form.
Completely.
That's what I personally found. It's been a game changer for me.
Well, I mean,
honestly.
you've obviously got a higher purpose now, don't you? Which is totally different, and it was never even on your compass before.
Yeah. No, it wasn't.
So I mean,
exactly.
Let's talk about.
Yeah, no.
Well, I was going to say, let's talk about the training side. I mean, what's involved, and you're doing all these kind of,
of course,
I'll say crazy challenges, because they seem crazy, the distances that you're doing.
Yeah. So obviously I did the 50K back in November. Decided that I wanted to do 4 main challenges this year. Obviously all in aid of Mine charity. So that's the charity of choice we're raising money for. And I've got 4 this year, and I wanted to make sure they were sort of a combination of physical challenges, mental, musical, because obviously that's a big part of my life, and also community challenges. So the first one is actually a David Goggins inspired challenge.
So you're staying
he's an
hard.
Absolute animal. Talk about mental tough. Yeah, stay hard. Exactly. That's it. Talk about mental toughness. There's no one more mentally tough than that guy. So I'm doing he's something else, but it's 4 miles every 4 hours across 48 hours. So I think the hardest part of that one is going to be the routine of waking up during the middle of the night and being like, I'm up, I've got to run. That's gonna suck. But again, like, that's why it's such a good challenge, because it's just taking you out of your comfort zone. So that's coming up in a few weeks' time, and I'm still fundraising for that challenge. So if anyone, you know, is a big advocate for mental health, please do donate. It's going towards an incredible charity that helps hundreds of thousands of people every single day in the UK and worldwide.
What was the other one? You mentioned,
so that's the first one
that you said.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a 24-hour songwriting challenge with a friend of mine. And that's basically, we're going to try and write a song an hour. And we're going to give ourselves briefs. So that, because we didn't want to just sit down and be like, oh, what ideas have we got? We're going to give ourselves like fun briefs, like write a song for Taylor Swift in, you know, this kind of, you know, and the topic has to be, well, if it's Taylor Swift, it's going to be a breakup song, isn't it? So
are you going to go live?
We're just giving ourselves these fun briefs.
Yeah.
We're going to go live. So that's going to be in June. We're going to do live, because I think what could be cool as well is having audience members, like, you know, saying, oh, why don't you try this? You know, because we will target musical people as well. So we might bring them into the whole thing and open it up a bit and see if we can get some fun collaboration. It'd be really fun. So that's the second challenge of the year. The third challenge is probably the most tricky. That's the Ironman. So to be honest, that's the thing I've been continuously training for since December, because it's so demanding physically and mentally. So yeah, currently I'm you know, I'm getting up to around 3-4 hours on the bike at a time. I'm also doing, obviously my running's probably my best asset in terms of the endurance activities, because I know I can do a 50k and that's all good. Swimming is very tricky for me because it's new. So I'm just spending a bit more time in the pool at the moment, you know, trying to get like over an hour in the pool and getting up to about, you know, 2,500 meters at the minute, but I'm going to have to hit, you know, 3.8
Nice and fresh for you too,
kilometers
training in the water
for
at the
the
moment
actual
over there.
event. Yeah, exactly. Well, so I'm using I use a Nuffield gym, and they've got a nice 25-meter pool. So I've been using that currently. But at the same time, Ben, I'm a big, you know, part of what makes me tick is weights. Like, so I'm still doing a ton of lifting. You know, I really love that. That gives me something that endurance possibly doesn't. Like, I really do enjoy um lifting weights as well. So I do both. So I guess I'm trying to do the whole hybrid trainer sort of thing.
What would you say to anyone
and
who's
strength
considering a challenge of sorts, and you know, it's been on the fence for a little while, given that you've done a 50-kilometer one already and you're preparing for these other 3 or 4 for the remainder of this year?
Absolutely. So my biggest tip would be, before you decide on a challenge, decide on a charity that you actually are strongly tied with emotionally. I don't think I would be as feel so competitive about these challenges if it wasn't for my love for helping people with sort of mental health issues. So I'd do that first. I'd look at, you know, what are you really strongly passionate about? Is it mountain rescue in the Lake District? It could be so many things, couldn't it? You know, cancer research, you know, anything that's close to your heart. Pick a charity that you would love to help. And then second to that, get creative. Like, even if you're not you know, if you're not physically, you know, if you don't want to be doing the crazy physical challenges, that doesn't mean you can't do another type of challenge. There's so many possibilities out there that have already been done, but again, you could make up your own challenge. But yeah, exactly. You could grow your fingernails to if you want to do that. But of course, like, I will always be a big advocate for these physical challenges because of what they do for our mental and physical health. Because one, it pushes you to places you didn't think you could go in a good way. And physically you're getting fit, and like, you know, you want to look good, you want to feel good, because if you feel good and look good, the people around you are going to feel
absolutely
good.
well said. I mean, what goes through your mind, I'm curious, you know, when you're 30-40 kilometers into such a massive challenge like that, you know, to obviously know that the end's kind of in sight, but I've still got a way to go. The mind must be playing all kinds of tricks on you.
Big time. Yeah, there is this sort of internal dialogue going on for sure. Especially if I can go back a couple of months to the 50k challenge. I got to 43 kilometers and it felt like my legs had been shot, honestly, because I've never run as far as, I guess, 35 kilometers. So even just doing a couple of extra kilometers was such a shock to the body. So my joints felt like they were just eroding. But it wasn't just your legs. It's, you know, when you're upright running for that long, the back of your neck starts aching. Everything's aching and screaming for you to stop. And that's when, I guess, your mental resilience has to come into it. And you just start, I don't know, for me, you know, I have sort of my go-to, like, I hear my mum and my stepdad's voice sort of like cheering me on in the background. That they're the voices I hear that are really positive, that have always been a positive influence in my life. So I hear their voices, and that stuff like that really pushes me through to the end.
And then of course, you know, that you'd rehearsed and that you would kind of go to try and reframe and recenter and get back, or X amount of steps at a time, or whatever you needed?
I guess the whole one foot in front of another is that, I know that's pretty basic, but when you are at that point where you could just stop any minute, that's how you have to approach it, because that's the only way you're going to get to the end, is just these tiny little goals, like 1 foot, 1 foot. But I wouldn't, to be honest, no exact mantras. Again, I think it's probably more of a feeling. And like I said, knowing, because throughout my whole life, I've had positive voices in my life, I've had negative voices. So I think that's been a huge thing in my recovery, is the voices I'm picking to listen to now. So that's why their voices ring so loud in my head now, because they're the ones that have got me to where I am and pushing me through to the finish line. I know that sounds a bit mental, but it really helps.
It's like one of those things. We can't understand until we're there ourselves. And unless we've ran 50 kilometers or, you know, doing any kind of extreme challenge, we're not to judge, because God knows what I would be saying to myself, you know, 35 kilometers in.
I don't know, but you're in very good shape, my man. So I'm sure you do all right.
Maybe that's a conversation for another time. But yeah, I mean, we could do a challenge together, couldn't we?
I was just going to say, when you're back in the UK, I would love us to, well, for starters, just catch up. But I think it'd be really cool to do something like that together.
Get as many people on board as we can, obviously, and spread the good word where you can.
Exactly. Definitely.
So how's
music going? That would be great.
Now that you're, you know, you're on the sober train, and have you got a lot of gigs booked in? How are you finding that environment?
Yeah. So many gigs. So obviously I would normally drink throughout my gigs. That's obviously changed. But the thing is, I lost my love for music throughout my addiction. I fell out of love with everything. The only thing that kept me going was the booze and the drugs, unfortunately. So since my recovery started, I've rediscovered my love for what I do, for my music. Because I would once resent having to go to gigs and being like, oh, it's a Friday night, why can't I just be going out with my mates? But I don't think that way anymore. I realize how lucky I am to be able to do this. Like, not everyone can pick up a guitar and just start playing and singing. So it's really altered my perspective. You know, everything's been reset in that department. So it was almost like I was starting from scratch, but I already had the luxury of, I already was working in music. So I was going back to my job, but I started loving what I was doing again. And as a result of that, the more gigs have been coming through. You know, I play in hospitals now. Actually, I've sort of opened up my mind to doing gigs that I guess once upon a time wouldn't do. So I play at the Hospital of Neurodisability in Putney, and you know, again, I know I'm getting paid a little bit for it, but I guess I'm doing it more for the fact that, you know, these people don't get to listen to music like the average person on the street. So that feels incredible to be able to do those sorts of things, which in my addiction, I wouldn't have been doing that stuff though, because I was a selfish guy back then. That's what the addiction did to me. It stopped me opening my heart to these things. So I'm doing that sort of stuff. I'm still mentoring young songwriters with a company I work with called Song Academy. They're incredible. Like, they're all about freedom of expression for young kids. You know, kids are going through a rough time now with, you know, the world is not looking too good. So I think having like something like songwriting there for them as a way to express how they're feeling is incredible. So I feel very lucky to be a part of that with a group of such talented kids that, you know, I can help them say what they want to say without the fear of being judged.
So
I do that.
You got anything in the mix at the moment?
And then,
who are you signed to?
Yeah. So I signed a publishing deal in the lockdown to BMG, which is branched off from Sony. So I write songs for myself, for other artists. I've actually got a record coming out that I'm featuring on with. He's quite a big name in Russia. He's called Rasta.
So
he's got like 100,000 followers. and I've
No.
no.
Right.
I don't think I'll be touring Russia anytime soon. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about hanging out with Putin and his
Nobody
mates,
mentioned
so.
him.
Yeah, so Rasta actually, since the whole Russian invasion happened, he moved to Bali because because the restrictions happened. Like I actually, whilst he was in Russia, I couldn't work with
They
him
got cut off
because of because it all cut off. So he moved to Bali, and he's very happy there, and we're able to work together. So I've got these fun collaborations, and that's
Bali,
within the dance.
Come down a little bit further to
Thanks,
Australia.
Mate. Yeah, there we go. That's true. Yeah, and I should get a trip sorted. But yeah, so that's all like dance music. But in terms of the stuff that I'm very excited about, so I've been actually talking to Mind about releasing an album. So since my recovery, I've written 2 albums, and they go into detail and depth, everything from what my addiction was, the bumps, the peaks and troughs within the journey, and then into recovery, what that looks like now, but also like the challenges that I still face, because that's one thing, like songwriting, that's a tool that allows me to be completely honest, because it is like I'm talking to a therapist when I'm writing a song. Everything I'm feeling is going onto a piece of paper. And then I've been taking these songs into the studio. So I was in the studio last Monday and I recorded a song called Devil's Eyes, which is one of my favorite. That's sort of like teenage dirtbag sort of vibe. It's very like angsty. In terms of the content, though, it's all about how I was sort of like possessed, because I felt like I was. So I was looking through the eyes, the lens of the devil.
That's interesting. But
that's what it's about. And so it is. Well, that's it. It's very it is quite poppy. But the content is very dark. So there's some contrasting themes in there, which, to be fair, I'm all about. I'm a big fan of I like sweet love songs and stuff, but the more real the song, the more I can feel it, and I hope that that's what I'm sort of like portraying in the songs that I'm writing now.
I look forward to hearing that, actually. Yeah,
I'll send you the demo before
Please
an exclusive.
Now you've got a new lovely lady in your life. Now, how has this kind of changed things for you on a personal level because of this whole new experience that you're going through with the sobriety, with your physical challenges, and a whole new lease of life? How is this relationship different to say past relationships that you've had when you were going through those times?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think for starters, I've approached this relationship being completely open and honest, whereas I'd never done that before. Any issues that I had, because I was in previous relationships, I was in my addiction and I hid it from them. I was doing it and they didn't realize. They must have known something was up with me, because of course I was coming down a lot. But I was just hiding it as best as I could. With my girlfriend now, from the very start, I made it very clear my journey and my choices that I'm making now to benefit my life. And she's been nothing but a support and so understanding, which I think is it wouldn't work otherwise, because what I'm decided to do, it is hard, and it's different. But the thing is, the other way, that wouldn't work for me, because otherwise I would just tear down everything that came with me. So I think that being open and honest is the best thing you can do in any relationship. No secrets. All the bad stuff because like if you're with the right person, like the right person will love you for all your flaws as well. So that's been the most important thing. And I think actually in terms of like getting closer, it does make you create more intimacy between two people when when you just share your heart, and you know, it really
It is,
is.
man.
It's a
That's
beautiful
such an
thing.
awesome, way of explaining it. I think it's really cool because a lot of relationships, man, as we hide behind a lot of home truths, and sometimes it
Yeah,
comes out in the wash in one way or
exactly.
another. Sometimes it doesn't come out at all, and that's why a
Yeah,
lot of relationships don't go the distance.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's it. And just being, you know, if you feel safe enough with someone, if you're having a bad day, it's fine to say you're having a bad day. Like that's, you know, no one's perfect. And you know, being, you know, that right person will be accepting of you having a bad day, and vice versa. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
I'm a
that's
very happy
awesome. I'm really
chap.
happy for you too, brother.
And I'll look forward to you meeting when you're
Mate,
in
I
the
just got
UK.
one more
Thanks,
question and
mate.
we'll finish up. My battery's
Yeah,
running low.
yeah,
I just
awesome.
want to
I've
know
enjoyed today.
what you would say, particularly, obviously to any sex, right? But particularly the men who aren't that well equipped emotionally, and they don't understand how to express their feelings. They don't understand how to open up and to reach out for assistance when they need it. Coming from where you came from in such, as we said, that blokey kind of culture, to looking at you now in your own personal development, is obviously amazing. So what would you say?
I would say to those people, first of all, if you are involved in the drinking and drug culture, okay, so I'm looking at it from my perspective and what worked for me. That would have to go first, and that would possibly be the most challenging thing to get rid of first, because I know more than anyone, drugs and booze can become a massive crutch. You know, if you have anxiety issues, if you struggle to be out in social environments without drinking, I know that is going to be very, very, very hard. But you know, I think that does inevitably have to go first, because unless you do that, I don't think you're mentally capable of connecting with the parts of yourself that you need to connect with. Because booze and drugs, they will mask and distort
Sure.
your view of yourself, and
What about
how you see the world.
sorry, man,
So
what
I think
about,
if that,
someone who's not necessarily that way inclined, but just struggles to really open up,
okay,
learning what you have learned and now being so comfortable to speak so openly?
sure. Um, I guess finding, okay, so change. I know that that's a bit of like a blurry sort of answer, but in whatever way you see change happen, do. If something isn't working for you, say maybe it's gaming, you know, or anything, shopping. Like you
Just
can be
detrimental
addicted to a
habits.
number of things. It's exactly, if you know that it's having a negative impact on your life, you know, it's sort of like taking your ability of decision making away from you. Like it always wins in that sort of like, because we all have like two voices. It's like yes, no. If the voice that is bad for you is winning every time, that's where something does need to change. And I think a big thing in terms of change is trying to open yourself up to new things, trying things that you've never tried before. For me, I started reading. Like I was never a reader, but I started reading books by Gabor
Yeah.
Mate, Eckhart Tolle, these huge. Obviously, you're familiar with Eckhart's work, like the sort of spiritual leaders. That sort of teach you about how the power of
They're
now, and
onto
how
something
there is
like
only
that.
now, there's no past, there's no future, which they really are. But yeah, just I think also talking to you, you know, everyone does have someone they, well, I like to think that some, you know, they have someone that they feel safe enough to have a conversation with. If you aren't lucky enough in that situation, you know, there are professionals, you know, there's professional help that available in everywhere in the world. And you know, in the UK, we've got Samaritan's helpline. You know, that's a free helpline for anyone suffering. You know, maybe who don't have the financial resources to get help. But then you do, like, you've got Mind. Mind has a website full of incredible advice, and they do have therapists on there that are a bit more cheap than. And also, you could refer to the NHS. I know that can be a very lengthy process, but I'd just talk to someone, you know, as hard as that is. Share how you're really feeling, but of course, they've got to be someone that you feel incredibly safe with. And I hope that everyone has that, at least one person in their life that does that for them. But yeah, I'd say, you know, talking, being open and honest, and change your routine, change your hairstyle. I've suddenly started wearing caps, and I know, I know, but like I was just like, I want to try. I want to look a bit different. So I started wearing caps, and I was like, oh, this is a new me. And I think that all that stuff's really healthy, because we can get stuck in our own little, patterns of like, and we don't, our identity is how we see ourselves, and like that can change. Like you to get too attached to an identity, I think can be quite damaging. So, it is just about mixing it up, and having some fun along the way. Come on, we're here
we
are.
Life's too short, as we all know, and I think, like anything, that there's an association of a thought or a belief pattern, therapy or counseling or whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to have negative undertones necessarily. A lot of people, particularly over in America, it's very, very common just to check in and just to have a chat, and they might name it differently, like a performance coach or a self-development assessor or whatever. And I've had plenty of these conversations, but it is really interesting how a little tweak and a reframe can just open up so much more for you.
Absolutely, man. No, totally. And yeah, no, thank you for having me on your platform today. It's I know it's a very different time difference. What are you, are you 7 or 8 o'clock now?
I think somewhere thereabouts. We're about 9 hours ahead of the UK.
Okay, yeah, it's 10 a.m. here. But no, do make sure you get back to the UK at some point, and we'll need to have a big